Hello, it's Mr. John here, and welcome to today's lesson. Today we're going to have a reading from this book, 100 Facts Seashore. As you would all know, Hong Kong is surrounded by coastline, by seashore, with different beaches, rocky coastlines, and cliffs. So I hope we can all relate to this book and enjoy what we're about to read.
Let's have a look at the front cover of today's book. It's titled 100 Facts Seashore. The publisher, Miles Kelly. Just before we turn the page, let's have a look at the picture here. What we can see is some seawater, some very clear seawater with some starfish, which is sea life, which you can find on the occasion if you walk along a seashore. Let's start reading. Let's turn the page. The title of this page is The Edge of the Land. 1. Seashores can be found all over the world, from icy coastlines near the poles to sandy beaches in hot tropical areas, as well as making unique habitats, natural homes, for many plants and animals. Seashores are also very important to people. Today, large areas of Earth's 700,000 plus kilometers of seashores are in danger and in need of our protection. As we can see, our Earth has hundreds of thousands of kilometers of seashore, and we need to protect our seashore. Hong Kong is a unique place that is totally surrounded by coastlines, including cliffs, beaches, and other waterways. Let's keep reading. Let's turn the page. Land meets sea. 2. Seashores are places where the salty water of seas and oceans meet land made of rocks, mud, sand, or other material. A seashore is the edge of the land and the edge of the sea. So we can see some pictures here, one of an iceberg in Iceland, where of course the seashore is very cold there, and below we can see a photo in Mexico, a tourist beach where it's very warm and sunny. Let's keep reading. Let's turn to the next slide. 3. There are names for different types of seashores. If the rocks are tall and upright, they are known as cliffs. If the sand is smooth and slopes gently, it is a beach. Seashores are known as oceanic coasts or marine or sea coastlines. So we can see there's different types of coastlines, aren't there? And here in Hong Kong, we have all of the types of coastlines, from rocky coastlines to big cliffs and nice sandy beaches. We can see a picture of a beach in the Caribbean in this photo. Let's turn to the next page. 4. Water moves easily with waves, tides, and currents. So seashores are never still. They are complicated habitats for nature, as only certain kinds of animals and plants can live there. Wildlife must be able to survive in the changing conditions that are typical of most seashores. If we have a look at the photo, we can see an iceberg breaking from a glacier near Antarctica, which is very, very cold. Let's keep reading. Let's turn to the next page. 5. There are more than 700,000 kilometers of seashore. Canada is the country with the longest total seashore, at more than 202,000 kilometers. Indonesia is next with 55,000 kilometers of seashore. So as we can see, the world has lots of seashore, and Canada is a big country with a lot of seashore. Canada also has some very large islands which make up much of its seashore. Let's keep reading. Let's turn to the next page. Okay, the title of this page is Endless Battles. It's going to talk about the power of the sea and erosion. Let's look at section number 8. The sea's power is immense. Winds, waves, tides, and currents wear away, erode the land. Big waves hit the shore with enough energy to throw around boulders the size of cars. Even small waves roll around tiny bits of rock that rub and scour the land. Let's move over to part number 9. In some places, the sea wins the battle along the shore. The land is gradually rubbed away, or parts collapse and slide into the water. The pieces or particles are swept away by waves, tides, and currents. Let's have a look at the photos on this page. You can see some destruction done by the waves of the sea that have eroded away the sea banks, turning the dirt into rubble and pushing it into the sea and destroying anything that's lying above it, like these houses that have fallen into the sea in England. As we know in Hong Kong, after big storms and typhoons, we will often see some damage, sometimes a lot of damage, not only caused by the wind, but by the seas and the waves crashing into our coastline here in Hong Kong. Let's keep moving. Let's turn the page. Okay, this one's titled Tides, Currents, and Winds. Let's look at point 13. Almost all seashores have tides, which affect the way the land is worn away. Tides alter the amount of time that a particular patch of shore is underwater or exposed to the air, so they also affect coastal habitats and wildlife. Let's read a little bit more about tides in section 14. Tides are caused by the pulling power or gravity of the moon and sun and the daily spinning of the earth. A high tide occurs about 12.5 hours after the previous high tide, with low tides midway between. Okay, so I'm not sure if you knew, but the tides, and that's when the water, the seawater, goes out and comes back in, goes out and comes back in, is actually caused by the force of the moon onto the earth. Quite interesting, isn't it? Let's keep reading. Let's look at the next page. Let's just read section 16. Tides produce zones along seashores from the high tide zone to the low tide zone. Different seaweeds and animals are adapted to each zone. Now, some of this text may be a little bit too small for you to read, but I'll just quickly read out the zones. We've got the first zone, the lower intertidal zone. So this is where the water is fairly deep, and you'll find things like starfish and crabs and the bigger seaweeds. The other one, the second one, is the mid-intertidal zone. This is where it's sort of underwater half the time, and the other time when the tide is out, it's exposed. This is where you'll find barnacles and mussels and some other types of crab. The third section is the upper intertidal zone. This is exposed to air most of the time, but there's some seawater some of the time when the tide comes in. This is where you'll find some things like shells and limpets. And then the fourth zone, the last zone, is called the splash zone. And this is where it is mainly dry, but just receives some spray from the waves. And here you'll find some things like lichens, which is a little bit like moss growing on the rocks. Let's keep reading and let's turn to the next page. Okay, sandy beaches. This is probably one of our favourite parts of the coastline, isn't it? Beaches are areas where we can have fun, play, maybe kick a ball, look around for things, and it's fairly safe, isn't it? Let's read a little bit more about sandy beaches, part 36. Sandy shores need gentle winds, waves, and currents that are still strong enough to wash away silt and mud. Just above high tide, any rain quickly drains away between the grains of sand, so it is too dry for land plants to grow. Below this, the grains move with the wind, waves and tides, so few sea plants can grow there either. So what it's saying is the sandy part of the beach doesn't really support plants or shrubs or weeds. That's why it stays white and clear and clean and a fun place to hang out. Let's have a look at that little section in the pink. It says, I don't believe it. It says, searching along the beach strand line is known as beach combing. It is especially rewarding after a big storm. So beach combing is just when we go down the beach and we look for things, we search for things like pretty pebbles and different sort of shells. It's a lot of fun. Let's move on to the next page now, which will be the last page of today's reading. Let's turn the page. Let's look at number 37. Most sandy shore life is under the surface. Animals hide under the sand while the tide is out. As it rises, it brings with it tiny plants and animals known as plankton and bits of dead plants and creatures, shrimps, lugworms, clams, tellins, scallops, and heart urchins burrow through the sand or filter the water to feed. So as we can see in the picture, lots of the animals and creatures that live near the shore or on the beach, they actually live under the sand. Let's look at the last point, number 38. Small sandy shore animals are meals for bigger predators that follow the tide, including cuttlefish, octopus, and fish such as sea bass and flatfish. The giant sea bass of North Pacific shores grows to more than 2 meters long and weighs 250 kilograms. So as we can see, there's lots of different creatures, some little tiny worms and really, really big fish that live right along the seashore, right where the sea meets the sand. And they live there, they feed there, and spend their whole lives there, on the seashore, near the beach. Okay, let's just look at the next slide and look at some photographs from around Hong Kong. Let's turn now. Now, can you see these photographs? Have a good look. these are different seashores around Hong Kong. Up the top, we can see lovely sandy beaches. Then slightly to the right in the middle, we can see more of a stony, rocky coastline. And at the lower left, we can see a mangrove swamp, a part of the coastline of Hong Kong. Can you guess where these seashore locations are in Hong Kong? Let's think about that and maybe ask Mum and Dad, where do you think these areas are? These seashore areas around Hong Kong.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's reading, and I hope you all learnt a little bit more about the seashore, an area that we have so much of here in Hong Kong. Harbours, cliffs, beaches, and rocky coasts. I also hope you enjoyed some of the photos that I provided of the different types of seashores here in Hong Kong. I'm looking forward to seeing you next time. Goodbye.